Hey everyone! Today I want to talk about Reminiscences of a Journey to Lithuania from 1972 by Jonas Mekas. This is the 46th video of my 1000 favorite movie series, where I talk about the movies I love the most in a random order. Jonas Mekas was one of the key American underground experimental filmmakers to come out of the 60s and 70s. He was a massively influential figure, arguably just as much for his criticism and work to promote fellow filmmakers outside of the mainstream as his movies. He made these kind of diary films where he basically took home movies, edited them in a very experimental way, and presented them with him giving commentary or playing music in the background. I've seen 3 of these films so far, including his most famous movie, As I Was Moving Ahead, I Occasionally Saw Brief Glimpses of Beauty, and his landmark film that started it all, Walden Diaries, Notes, and Sketches. Both of these films are epics, approaching 5 and 3 hours, respectively, but even in the face of those behemoths, I'd argue that his Reminiscences of a Journey to Lithuania, at less than an hour and a half, is his best movie. There are 3 main reasons why I think this is. One is, frankly, the length. Now, don't get me wrong, I love long, epic films as much as the next guy, but to be totally honest, watching hours upon hours of someone else's home movies can be kind of a daunting proposition, no matter how beautiful and poetic they may be. At 82 minutes, this movie never overstays its welcome. Second, this is probably the most structured of these movies, being split into 3 clear sections that feel purposeful. The first and third are short and almost the same length, while the second section is the longest and the main meat of the film. This gives the movie the feeling of musical construction that the other sprawling, less structured movies lack. And frankly, I think that this movie clearly wants to say something and speak to a universal truth, beyond just simply showing the beauty Mekas has found in his life, which is what I think the other films more or less only focus on. In other words, there's a thesis here, making the experience more fulfilling for me. It simply sticks in my head more than his other films. This doesn't mean that Reminiscences of a Journey to Lithuania is less of a personal film. Far from it. It might actually be his most autobiographical film in terms of telling us a story of his life. The first section shows various scenes from his life in New York, mostly from the 50s, right after when he and his brother first came in 1949. He's had a great life there with many friends, but no one knows about his home country of Lithuania or what happened there, and there's a certain sense of melancholy in this segment as he reflects on his history. The second section is titled 100 Glimpses of Lithuania, August 1971, and it shows a ton of footage from his and his brother's first return back to their hometown. We get to meet their mother and spend a lot of time with her, as well as many other family members and people in the community. The third section has him going to Hamburg, where he was detained in a labor camp, and then going to Vienna to hang out with fellow experimental filmmaker Peter Kubelka and others to explore the old city. So yes, the movie roughly tells the story of his life, but there's real poetic feeling to it, not just from the footage itself, but in the play between past and present. All the footage in the second and third segments are contemporary, but he uses it to explore the past, primarily his hometown, which looks like it probably hasn't changed much at all from when he left almost 30 years ago. Laid on top of it is Mekas commenting on it again from the future, so there's kind of like a double layer of reminiscing. For example, one of the most powerful moments of this for me is when he encounters a group of playing children in Hamburg, outside one of the factories where he was forced to work while imprisoned, from where he and his brother escaped. He says, "Oh yes, run children, run. I was also running once from here, but I was running for my life. I hope you'll never have to run for your lives. Run children, run." Here he talks about his own past through the contemporary footage and makes a poetic connection between past and present. Another, lighter example is when they visit their old school with another old friend, and as Mekas talks about the wonderful cold winter days, his brother and friend start racing, which I'm going to assume is something that they used to do when they were young back in the day. This time, they recreate memories, again bringing past and present together. And through it all, we get to hear Jonas Mekas' voice, which is likely one of the warmest and most distinctive voices of any director. Hearing it is like a blanket. It feels personal and cozy, while also sounding very wistful and melancholy. In other words, he's probably the complete opposite of me. I think it's the many pauses he takes that gives it this touch, as well as his accent. The only thing that's missing is singing, which can be found in As I Was Moving Ahead, but there are beautiful readings of his reminiscences, such as when he asks where his old friends are scattered, and he wonders if they're through the torture rooms. He spaces it like, through the torture rooms, and it's really haunting as a result. It can sound sad when he talks about the past, and when combined with the joy that's in the images, it creates a lasting impression. And this joy is no more evident than it is with the mother. She seems absolutely lovely, but it's deeper than that. She's very active, constantly doing work like cooking and so on. When I see her working away at her outside kitchen, which she has because she doesn't like to cook inside, I can't help but think of all those years when her sons never visited her. Her doing all this hard work in isolation. But yet, she has a great spirit, and a sense of humor to boot. After all, according to her, the only thing to know about the old age is that you can't find your spoons when you get old. But who am I to talk about someone else's personal life and past history like it was up for judgment? The most important thing is that in the second section, Mekas puts all this footage together expertly and with great depth of feeling, especially either when he talks or when beautiful music plays in the background, which is almost the entire time. The other two segments are almost as moving, although I'd like to talk about the third section a little bit more. Right after the earlier scene I mentioned with the children playing, we cut to Mekas in Vienna, starting with a rousing choral piece introducing Peter Kubelka, or as the movie puts it, Saint Peter Kubelka. The movie's focus suddenly shifts to him, following him as we travel throughout Vienna. We meet some of Mekas' other friends as well, but Kubelka stays almost the main character. I don't really know what to think about this. It's nice that he thinks so highly of his friend, but it kind of changes the focus of the film so much that until the very last minute or two, the film never fully recovers for me. But even so, the footage inside these old buildings is gorgeous, and the images and sounds never stumble, even if reminiscing on history takes a back seat. Also, I mentioned earlier that Mekas edits his footage in an experimental way, which is impossible to capture with just still images. He typically speeds up the film very quickly and edits different footage together in rapid succession, and a lot of times this speed can create a very jarring effect, especially because the camera is usually handheld, so the shakiness is emphasized. The benefit of the style is that he's able to fit a lot of footage into a little space, but sometimes you wish he would slow down a little bit. Well, he does in this movie more than his other ones I've seen, or at least that's what it seems like. I think Mekas has a great balance here between his experimental methods and letting the footage breathe so we can appreciate it. I'll now try to list some of my favorite moments, but it's fairly difficult given the nature of the film for me. First, I want to point out just how wonderful the music is in many sequences. I'm thinking of the beginning of Part 2, for example, where a beautiful mellow choir piece introduces us to Lithuania. The ending of Part 3 also sticks out, as well as the powerful music that introduces Kubelka. This and the many other pieces of music, which are usually of the piano and accordion variety, really complement the images and carry you through the movie. I also like how Mekas will suddenly stop the music, Godard style, so that he can talk. Next, there are a couple of things that Mekas says in narration that had an impact besides those that I've already mentioned. One comes from Part 1, where he says, "We loved you, world, but you did lousy things to us," referring to the troubles he's had since he left home. Another is when he finds the site of his old labor camp in Hamburg, and he says, "When we asked some people around, nobody remembered that there was a labor camp there. Only the grass remembers." Finally, I mentioned before that the title of Part 2 is 100 Glimpses of Lithuania, and indeed that's how the movie plays. There are intertitles after that starting at 1, and then continuing on. This is nice because we can know roughly how much time and footage is left for the rest of the part, besides being a nice way to separate the various sequences. Well, after the number 91 shows, we're taken to the airport where the crew will leave Lithuania, and Mekas is really sad about it. After a minute or so, Part 3 begins, so there are only really 91 glimpses. Why is this memorable? I guess because it goes against expectations, but if I want to be out there, I can imagine that it's Mekas being passive-aggressive at the fact that he had to leave his own country, so he childishly took it out on the numbers. I can't think of any other explanation for why he wanted to cut it short of 100. But in the end, what I love about Reminiscences of a Journey to Lithuania is that it's more than just a collection of home movies, like his other movies here are a little close to being, I think. It's not just about Jonas Mekas himself, but about anyone who's far from home, and what it's like to relive your past through the lens of the present. This is done with great poetry and beauty through Mekas' signature editing style, his voice, the music, and of course above all, the great footage. I think it's his best movie, and I know it's one of my top 1000 favorite movies. Thanks for watching my video! Goshoujo makoto ni arigatou gozaimasu! Have you seen Reminiscences of a Journey to Lithuania? Let me know what you think in the comments. I think of all my favorite movies as my friends, and I think of my audience as friends too. Remember, I upload a new video every Friday, so if you want to help me complete this 1000 favorite movies epic, don't forget to like and subscribe.